Hello to anyone that may be listening, and welcome to the first episode of the Hold It In podcast. To say that it's surreal that I have my own podcast now would honestly be the understatement of the century. If you had told me even 3 to 4 months ago that I'd be hosting, let alone editing, producing, all on my own, I would legitimately think that you're the most delusional person on this planet. And I think that anyone that knows me, whether they know me now or they used to know me, can probably say the same thing and would probably attest to that also. I've always hated the sound of my own voice in recordings or any time that I could hear it. I don't even like talking to people really that much. I don't even like calling the Taco Bell down the street near me to see if they're still open because they tend to close early a lot of the time. So just the fact that I'm even doing this, it's just something that I never thought that I would be doing. But at the same time, life comes at you fast. And I think that you just never know where your true interests may lie, or things that you might enjoy doing that you just don't know yet, if you don't try at least. And so here we are today. So before we get into the actual topics that I want to discuss for each episode, I want to just talk about something that's maybe something that's been on my mind recently, something that's been trending on social media, something that's not horrible at least. Just something a little bit lighter, since on this podcast, I want to talk about typically more heavier things. And the thing that I want to talk about today is something that I feel like has helped me be more productive in my day to day life and also enrich it, which is reading. I've never really been someone that reads books often, but for whatever reason, I started getting recommendations on YouTube for people who review books or have book clubs, things of that sort. And so I started watching them, and I was just thinking that maybe I could get into it too. And so that's pretty much exactly what I did. I took a couple of recommendations, and I found out that reading is something that I actually kind of enjoy. A lot of the recommendations were pretty much novels, and I've also been finding some manga that I've been getting into recently. And for anyone that doesn't know what manga is, it's just basically anime in book form. I've also been looking into getting some self help books because let's face it, I need all the help I can get. But regardless of what I'm reading, it just makes me feel more accomplished with my day. It makes me feel like I'm actually doing something that is enriching my life and not making me feel like I'm wasting my life away for the most part. And even the books that I didn't particularly enjoy, I still feel like I got something out of it. I got some kind of experience out of it, or I learned something from it. But sometimes, even when I'm reading, I still get this sense of what else could I be doing right now? What else should I be doing right now? I feel like I should be doing something more productive. I feel like there's something better with my life that I could be doing right now. Which brings me into my topic today of what's known as chronophobia or time anxiety. To give a better explanation of this, I'm going to take video games and my experience with video games as an example. So, I've been a gamer my entire life for literally as long as I can remember, probably before I can even remember. But recently, I just feel like I haven't been enjoying video games as much. But the more I think about it, I don't think it's because I don't enjoy video games themselves, but I just always have this impending doom sort of feeling that time is just passing me by anytime that I'm playing. I'm always thinking I could be looking for a new job right now. I could be drawing right now. I could be working on my podcast right now. But instead, I'm sitting here playing video games. And it really doesn't even matter how productive I was for the entire day. It's just as soon as I start playing or really doing almost anything for leisure, I just start to get this feeling and these questions just start popping up in my head. I don't think that this disorder is anything new or novelty, but I think that the rise of social media in general has really intensified it and made it something that more people are at least aware of. And not to be too old man yells at clouds here, but I think that social media is definitely the biggest reason as to why so many people, especially younger people, are now fearful of the passage of time. So I really want to figure out where this is all stemming from and how those of us who are dealing with this disorder can finally overcome it, or at least make it a little bit easier to cope with. If we take away anything from this episode, I want it to be the fact that we need to stop pretending that anyone past the age of, say, 25 is geriatric, because it's really just not the case. And I'm saying we, including myself, not because I'm one of the people who is basically age shaming somebody for being not old at all, but because I myself tend to fall into this notion, or I tend to believe this notion that time is just passing me by and that I'm getting old and that I'm not doing anything with my life. I think that we also see these people that are younger than us, these TikTokers, these YouTubers, Instagram influencers, and all that, and also things like the Forbes 30 under 30 list. These things that make it seem like we have a time limit on success or a time limit on our life in general. But on the same end, we just have to recognize that everybody is on their own path and that success looks like something different to literally everybody. We shouldn't let these outside influences make us have this irrational fear of the inevitable ticking clock that is life. Much easier said than done, of course, but I think that we can get there with time. So social media is obviously a major factor in it. But there's also, of course, the elephant in the room that affected everybody in one way or another. The pandemonium, the Pandora's box, the Panda Express, whatever you want to call it. It gave a lot of people the sense that their life was just slipping away, that there's nothing that they could do about it. Now, I will say personally that I was just chilling. I really wasn't doing anything. But the thing is, I'm kind of facing the consequences of that today. I just think to myself that I spent almost the better part of 2 years doing practically nothing. Sometimes I think I could have started this podcast almost 3 years ago at this point. I could have started doing home workouts and getting in better shape. I could have learned how to cook better. I could have done literally anything, and I chose to do absolutely nothing. It's not something that is always on the forefront of my mind, but it's definitely something that comes back to haunt me every now and then. And I think it's something that a lot of people are trying to overcompensate for now. We see a lot of people starting their own businesses or quitting their jobs or pursuing hobbies that they might not have pursued before. And I think it's a result of people just wanting to take back control of their time and feel like they're just using their time wisely, which is exactly why I'm starting this podcast and working on things that I've been putting off for so long at this point. So I think at this point we have a pretty good understanding of where this all stems from, but the issue is, how do we actually deal with it? And I thought of a couple of things that I wanted to share today. What if I started thinking of the anxiety in a different way? What if I just flipped the script on it? Instead of using it as a deterrent, why don't I use it as motivation instead? And start thinking, time is always going to be moving, so why don't I just use this time now to do the things that I want to do, instead of just putting it off, instead of waiting and regretting it later? Again, another thing that's a lot easier said than done, but changing our way of thinking is almost never going to be easy, and it's just something that we have to learn to do. Something else that I think could be really helpful, while it is rather cliche, I do want to add on to it a little bit, is setting goals. Set goals, both short and long term, but what I want to add on to that is to keep setting goals. Because once you reach your goals, once you've completed whatever it is that you wanted to complete, what comes after that? I thought of an example for this that I'm going to try to articulate as best I can. I try to imagine that I have everything that I could ever want, everything that I could ever need, all the money that I could ever spend in lifetimes. I've already done and accomplished pretty much anything that anyone could ever accomplish in their life. So where do I go from there? What do I have left to do? What do I have left to accomplish? And I'm sure there's a lot of people out there who could just coast through life, not really having any motivation per se, not really having anything to work towards, or not needing to work towards anything. But for somebody like me, it's really just not an option. I have to stay busy, I have to keep doing things. And so I think the best way to motivate myself is to keep setting goals and constantly having something to work towards. But on the other end of it, I think it's important to not overdo it, to not constantly stress yourself out about it and feel like you have a set deadline to meet these goals that you're setting. For example, I plan on going back to school next year to get my bachelor's degree. Currently undecided, but it's something that I know I want to do. I already have my associates, but getting a bachelor's degree at least has been something that I've wanted to do for a long time now. But at the same time, I don't want to tell myself that I'm going to graduate at a specific date or a specific year, because if I don't reach that deadline that I set for myself, it's probably going to end up making me feel worse. And so I kind of just generalized it to just graduating with a degree in general rather than setting a time constraint on it. I feel like a lot of us just get caught up in the passage of time and are just trying to do as much as we can. But I also think we need to give ourselves some leniency and just recognize that things take time and not everything is going to happen in our 20s or even our 30s. The last thing I want to say is that if you are dealing with this anxiety of time passing, if it's accessible to you, I would absolutely recommend seeking help, whether that's in the form of therapy or counseling, because it could be a sign of a bigger, more underlying issue. This is honestly some advice that I wish I could take for myself, but with the inaccessibility of healthcare overall, it's just not something that's feasible right now. But that's a whole other topic for another episode. So that about wraps up my thoughts on today's topics. I know that this episode is rather short, but I think I want to keep these episodes generally anywhere from around 15 to 30 minutes because one, I don't want them to drag on for too long, and two, I'm really trying to think of anything that I could talk to myself about for more than 30 minutes to begin with, and I really cannot think of anything. To be honest, even though this is something that I never thought I was going to do, it's been therapeutic in a way. It's been, dare I say, fun. Really, the whole process from writing out my thoughts, actually recording it, the editing process, really all of it. Definitely still learning, and I know I have a long way to go, but everyone's got to start somewhere, right? I suppose I fall under the guise of a content creator now, huh? So that's about it for me today, but before I go, I first and foremost want to thank anyone listening, especially if you made it all the way through. I really genuinely appreciate it. If you want to follow or subscribe on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, it would really mean a lot. Other platforms are going to be coming soon, but for now, Apple Podcasts or Spotify is the way to go. You can also follow me on Twitter at HoldItInPod, where I'll mostly be posting reminders of when episodes come out, other announcements, and engaging with you guys as well. I plan on releasing new episodes every Monday, so stay tuned for those. Until then, I'll see you all next time.